40.
40.
Big
Episode
40.
40.
It's time for
Social
a midlife
selling 40.
crisis.
Yes. Well,
Wait, we didn't have that already? I thought we had that already.
I think we had a midlife crisis too on LinkedIn this week because we couldn't invite anybody. Every time we tried to invite people to the show, it would freeze up. So hopefully somebody's here. If you're here, please let us know.
Yeah, no kidding.
To celebrate our 40th. But yeah, the 30s went by really fast. It was just seemed like a blink of an eye and we were through the 30s. Anyway, we have a really interesting show today. We are going to talk about the top 10 modern selling mindset shifts. I'll say that quickly. And these are things, Brandon, we've had a lot of conversations with recently with people that have been very eye-opening. So really interesting to get into that.
I mean, we had one yesterday with somebody, Fortune 100 leader, C-suite leader. I'll be honest, I was really, really shocked that that there was so much alignment on the statements of it. So, and then we had another one this morning, which was great. So yeah, this should be a good topic. I think it's going to be a little controversial for some sellers. We get Carson to weigh in on there and smack us around a bit if necessary.
I'm not controversial.
As we get older, we need to be more controversial.
That's right.
There you go.
Get a little edgy in our 40s here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I'm glad to see Butch is here. Butch is who won the dad joke challenge.
By the way, I saw Butch this morning and he said, "Hey, both dad jokes last week were lame. Neither one of them were good." I'm like, "Oh, thank you, appreciate that."
Good. So we had two losers. That's great.
Yeah.
We got from an airplane. I thought I'd get extra points for like sending it in from a plane.
Yeah. I tried. I really tried.
Mercy.
All right. So who wants to go first today?
I'm on it.
All right, let's do it.
You know why? Because I've been dealing with this with the ringing in the ears and stuff, and so I called the tinnitus hotline, but it just kept ringing.
Oh, that's the joke. Oh, okay.
That's bad. Oh,
okay.
man.
I get it.
Butch already called it a draw. That was generous of me.
All right, Carson.
All right. So I asked ChatGPT to give me a dad joke to kick off our podcast. Did you hear about the mathematician who's afraid of negative numbers?
No.
You stop at nothing to avoid them.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. I vote for Carson today.
Yeah, I'm going to vote for Carson. All right.
Glad to be.
Let's get to it.
Yeah, let's get to it. So what we've kind of accumulated these over the last few months, what we believe were the top 10 modern selling mind shifts. And these aren't in any particular order. So it's not like the Dave Letterman list where we're going from number 10 to number 1. These are just 10 things that we've identified. Would love to hear everyone's feedback as we go through, but let's start. And the first one, right, we've talked about this a million times, but number 1 is the buyer is in control of their buyer journey. Now, you would think that is kind of an obvious thing, but we hear all the time, and Carson, I'm also very interested in how you hear it. We still hear all the time as a no. As a seller, we're in control of the buyer journey, and the buyer is not in control of their buyer journey. That mindset is still there. And where we see that is where we end up seeing a lot of the trials and tribulations.
It's a very interesting time. And I would certainly agree that, specifically there's been a lot of shift, really because the buyer has so much at their fingertips, in the way of information and different resources. They've got the ability now to really arm themselves with much of what they need to know in order to make a decision. We've seen a lot of the stats. I think Challenger Sale teaches us that, a lot of the buyers are 57% of the way down the path before they even engage a seller. But they can make a lot of very informed decisions, navigate the process. There's so many different reports that are available right now from consultant firms. I see this all the time when I'm working with customer organizations and executives. They have these reports at their fingertips. Fortunately, I work for an organization that has very positive trajectory and momentum in a lot of those reportings, but that isn't always the case. And so there are less things now than ever before than we can actually control throughout that process. So as a result, I think it's really important that sellers recognize that they don't have as much control, adapt our approach to align with that buyer's journey, really understand what it looks like. There's a litany of ways to do that. I spend a lot of time to make sure that I understand buyers' timelines, when they're doing their budgeting, what their processes look like, figure out the things that you can control and that you can align to. And we're going to talk about a few of the other ways that you can develop this level of a relationship and become that trusted advisor. But as you do that, you've got to understand what the buyer process looks like. They are in control.
Yeah, and maybe we should go to number 2, Brandon, and kind of hit on the next one, because I think they go arm in arm, right?
Well, and they do, and that's what it's as Carson, we like move from 1 to 2. It flows like it. If you get 1, you get 2. In fact, if you take a holistic look at all 10, they're definitely very integrated. But it starts with those 2 intentionally, because if we truly believe, and that's what I think you were alluding to at the beginning, Tom, do we truly believe that the buyer is in control? And if we can get there, that they are in control, it should change everything else that we do, coming from that lens of being buyer-centric versus seller-centric. So if you get 1 down, moving into 2, then is it my sales motions need to align with their journey, not try to interrupt their journey, not try and cut them off in the pass, not try to shake them into giving us attention, asking for the demo too early, all those types of things. If we get 1, then number 2, I think, is a very natural next step.
Yeah, and number 2, just so everyone knows, is as a seller, you cannot control the buyer journey, but you can influence it, right? So obviously, you have to kind of believe in number 1 to get to number 2, but it's not this like, oh, well, all's lost, forget it. It's now, how do you help influence that buyer journey versus thinking you're going to control it all the way through?
Well, and that's where the brilliance of your book for anybody with the revenue zone and the concept of the yellow brick road, whether you want to call it that or not, the concept of, if we're going to align and be able to influence that, what Carson said, they're getting their information from G2, they're getting it from other places, they're doing their research, keeping sellers at arm's distance. If we try to get in and get their attention, like get on a call with me, something like, they're going to keep us out. But if we're doing things more, maybe we invite them to a webinar where they can stay anonymous. All right, maybe we're sharing a link to something, or bringing them on as a guest into a podcast or a show or things like that, that it's aligned with where they are. It's aligned with what they're doing. Then as we influence it, we'll start building our personal influence with them, and we become a part of their research process. We become a part of their internal conversation. I know, Carson, you've done this really well with large deals and large numbers of people at the same time.
Yeah, and I want to throw Dave's comment up as well, because he makes a really astute observation here. Buyers control the pace. If pushed, they're going to go elsewhere. A lot of sellers and sales managers don't get this. It's time for the old school to step away. We're not doing things the way that we did them, 10, 20, 30 years ago from a sales perspective. We have to be customer obsessed. We have to show up seeking to serve. And we're going to talk about that one too. But influencing these decisions, influencing, you can, figure out how you're going to get your information out there. Brandon, you called a great one out. We do webinars frequently. We do newsletters. There are things that you can control as part of that buyer journey to influence and show up in a very passive way, working to set up conversations around what they want to talk about. Right now, our buyers are screaming about what they want to be talking about. They want to realize cost consolidation and, reduced costs. And they want to hear about how they can leverage artificial intelligence to improve efficiencies, improve their customers' experience, all of those types of things. And we're exploring those types of use cases. So listen to your buyer and show up and help them understand how you can best bring resources to bear around what matters to them. Those are the ways that you can best influence that journey.
That's really good. And Tom, because in the several conversations you and I have had just this week, in the last couple of days, a tangible way of looking at what Carson just said, we kept hearing a few things that we were touching on, but we didn't make it as obvious as we should have. But by seeking to serve and really listening, what we heard loud and clear this week from leaders was the pipeline is a challenge. It's sluggish. Our forecasts are inconsistent, and this is causing pain for us, like a lot of pain. And we had been touching on it, but today we had that big aha moment, Tom, this morning after one of our calls. We're like, we need to put this more front and center. And we already started talking. We need to make this content and started tweaking our own yellow brick road just from getting that feedback. And maybe we're a little slower than we should have been, but it kind of hit us like a ton of bricks the last 2 days.
Well, and I think this ties into number 3, right? Number 3 is buyers welcome guidance and assistance on their own terms and schedule. But I would even go one step further. What your point, Brandon, just saying is not only on their own terms and schedule, but what they care about, not what we care about. And I think sometimes we get even, I would assume we're probably maybe a little bit better than average on how we go about looking at this. But I still think a lot of times we end up talking about what we think is important and not as much about what the customer or the prospect thinks is important. So it's a constantly learning, and they welcome it, right? When you do talk on their terms and what they care about, they welcome the guidance and assistance. But if you don't, then you're just noise, really, to a large degree.
Yeah, I mean, the key element here is you've got to build trust. They'll welcome guidance and assistance, but it's got to be at their pace. And that's why we have to show up, seeking to serve, building those trusted relationships, be available, be responsive. I've had many customers that have told me before, Carson, we've done business with you. You're more expensive, but you respond every single time. And you respond swiftly. And even if I don't have an immediate answer, a lot of times I will copy the customer in on my internal pursuit to find the answer to their question. If I don't have an answer right away, I will respond relatively swiftly to let them know that, hey, I've seen your inquiry. I'm on it. I'll give daily updates, whatever that looks like. Those are things that can set you apart and make you the differentiator so that they will welcome your guidance and they'll seek it out more often. Anytime a customer wants to talk to you, even if it's a negative situation, there's an opportunity. And that's the key element. That's what I really try to instill in my team. We've had some of our best deals come out of customer demands or requests to cut costs or to, out of customer service issues. And we've been able to turn these into great opportunities where we were able to overwhelm them with support and service. And it made the relationship better. And we were able to work better together going forward.
Yeah. And another really good comment here from Dave, right? He says in these uncertain economic times, some companies who are experiencing soft sales are panicking because they are not unwilling to embrace the change. And unfortunately, that's true. Sometimes we're finding they just don't know what the change is, but we are seeing in some cases they're not willing to embrace the change, and then just the stress factor gets even higher and higher.
Well, and we heard from high-level executive, C-suite executive with a $20 billion company say and shake their head going, I don't know what to do with this. Said there's a monthly, what they call it, like a telephone like challenge day, like everybody across the
Telemarketing
organization.
day, yeah.
Telemarketing day, that's right, telemarketing day. Everybody across was pounding the phones one day a month with all these, and this person was like, why are we doing this? Where's the fruit? Aren't we looking at the data that says this is not a high use of our time? And yet we spend an 8-hour day across the entire sales organization globally on telemarketing day.
Well, and she even said, right, not only did we not get a result, but we pissed off a lot of people. So sounds like a productive day. Right. Sounds like my usual day.
And it's still on the calendar though for next month too.
Yeah.
Because they're panicked and they don't know what to do with embracing change. So they try to do more of what worked in the past.
Right.
Pedal harder.
Yep.
That's what I like to call comfortable ways of failing. It's so hard to let them go.
Yeah. Yeah. And we, I think we've talked about it before. I think a lot of times with sales leaders, the mindset is, I'm not really sure what to do. So if I just keep pushing on the KPIs that we've pushed on for 20 years, nobody can blame me. Well, you might not get blamed, but if the budget's not there, you still might not have a job.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. So let's move into number 4 here. I'm going to recap real quick number 1, 2, and 3, just to set number 1 was the buyer is in control of their buyer journey. Number 2 is a seller. You cannot control the buyer journey, but you can influence it. And number 3, buyers welcome guidance and assistance on their own terms and schedule and their importance, what's important to them. All 3 of those kind of go arm in arm. Mm-hmm. These next section though, Brandon, I know this is one of your favorites, is number 4, earn conversations versus getting conversations. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you really absorb that and think about it, it'll change your behavior. It'll change your attitude towards it. The long-term mindset of get conversations means we're seller-centric, and we do the necessary. We pedal harder to go get those calls. But if we really can absorb that concept of earning the call, we're thinking about the buyer first, buyer-centric. How do we come along and earn the opportunity to have that conversation? And at that point, you have to be thinking about, how do I serve them? How do I respond to their needs? How do I think with them in mind? And let that influence my behavior, my activities.
Yeah, there's so much noise out there right now. And I think that's the key element. You know, we've talked on this show many times about how do you stand out amidst all that noise. And with that in mind, how do I earn the right to have this conversation? And you got to show up with value right out of the gate. And you have to be credible. You have to show that you've done your homework and figure out what's your best resource, what's your best foot forward. I had a guy that I worked with for the last few years, and I call him my CIO whisperer. It sure as heck isn't me, right? I'm not super technical. However, what I work on doing is trying to get the meeting, and then I bring this gentleman in with me, and it spins these conversations into gold. And every person that I've ever introduced this guy to, it has gone exceedingly well. And so that is, you know, figuring out, you know, what's my medium? What am I operating with? What are my tools? What are my resources? Figure out how you can show up credibly, listen, pay attention, show you've done your homework, and be sure you deliver value and resources to your customers, and you're going to earn your keep.
You're probably going to end up earning more conversations than you even want. You know, it ends up swinging.
And intangibly for people, because I know we get great feedback when we give tangible tasks from the show. Tangibly, earning a conversation versus getting it starts with commenting. Show up in their activities. Where are they asking questions or commenting, or what are they publishing? And showing up in those, like Carson said, be knowledgeable, be a reader in your industry, have something important to say, have an opinion, but consistently showing up in those comments, they change the lens in which they look at you. You're no longer, as I say, you no longer smell like sales. You control your reputation. They see you as somebody knowledgeable. They see you as somebody that they can go to. They see you more as that trusted advisor, which I know a lot of sales teams, we talk about being a trusted advisor. But the bottom line is this: you cannot be seen as a trusted advisor unless you're actually giving trusted advice. If you're just pounding phones and asking for calls and demanding their time, they're never going to see you as a trusted advisor.
Carson, you got Brandon fired up again. This is now like the second or third time I've seen him really just.
He's shining today. It's fantastic stuff.
Well, and here's why I screwed up with all these mindsets back in 2015, 2016. Like, I didn't go into it with these mindsets. I went into them with the old mindsets. And we've talked about this several times over the last few weeks. I don't know if we've done it on the show, but you know, the companies I built and the success that we had a call center. We did direct mail. We did cold calling. We moved into email, and we had this omni approach that had nothing to do with social. And this was back, you know, sold one in 07, another one in 2010. And then 2015, I come around arrogant and ignorant and let's go do, and it's in fairness to me and in grace to me, I'm not the only one that does this. What worked before, our mindset is, well, let's go do it again. And I spent money doing that. We built the call center. We bought the database. We did all this stuff. And what drove me nuts for so long was it didn't work. It wasn't working. And so I pedaled harder, fired the salespeople. Let's get more in. Let's send more in. Like, you just get in this routine of grinding. And it's not about your hustle. It's not about your hard work. It's the motions you're doing are not being received by your buyers.
Right. And they were before. Because the buyer was not in the control of their journey in 2008, the way that they're in control of their journey in 2016 or whenever you had that problem.
Exactly.
All right. So that was number 4, earn conversations versus getting conversations. I think number 5, we've kind of touched on already, but your job is to serve, not sell. And Brandon, was that kind of where you had that flip when you said you just, you were trying to sell and you realized you had to serve, or did that come later?
Yeah. I think 4, 5, and 6 we're all intertwined in what I learned is that we weren't trying to earn conversations. We were trying to get them. And we weren't seeking to serve. We were seeking to sell. Honestly, it was more like, we're going to go educate everybody on why they should be doing this. But we used the word educate, but we didn't try to educate. We demanded their time. That's why in 2018, I think, is when I wrote the white paper on the buyer circle of trust, because that's what we experienced. I realized that we were trying to get into their circle of trust. And they just kept us at arm's distance because they could. Right? They could go to G2, they could go do a Google search, they could go to LinkedIn or any other social and ask their network, what do you think of this? Who should we talk to? And they just kept us out. And so after beating my head on the wall for so long, the aha moment finally came when I realized we're shutting the company down because we ran out of money. It wasn't working. And I sat back trying to lick my wounds going, what the hell happened? 5, 6 years ago, this worked. And now we've gone through several $1 million and we don't have much to show for it. And it was a painful lesson.
Carson, we've talked a lot about a lot of your enterprise sales where you have multiple, sometimes hundreds of people involved in the sales process. Would you say, though, that this applies here as well in the enterprise, where when you even have these large teams, they're still looking for you to serve, not sell? And I assume if they get too much sales, it's more of a group pushback than you're getting pulled out of the circle of trust, pushed out of the circle of trust rather than pulled more into it.
Yeah. That's a great call out, Tom. It's really so person to person now. And I'm so infinitely grateful that I had very similar experience, Brandon. I came up in a call center. I was in a 1-call close environment. Dave, you're on fire today too. Great comments in the chat. I think, having come up in an environment where it was pound the phones, dial, and now making the transition into, today's selling climate, there are still a lot of sales fundamentals that are out there and that are very much in play, but they have to be buyer centric or you lose your horse in the race. You're gone. I think the key element that we want to understand here is that I have stakeholders, not just with the customer, but also internal stakeholders in different business units, partner stakeholders. I have to serve every one of them. And the beauty of this is, when I started working at this organization 9.5 years ago, I kind of showed up very hat in hand. I'm like, I'm just kind of an old sales dog, way out of place here. I'm just going to be very servant minded, build community around what we're doing. And it's worked everywhere that I've been, but it's all been at turning the lens at everybody that I'm working with and how do I serve those stakeholders. Now, there are still ways that you can use sales fundamentals as a part of that, but I have to understand what looks like a win to everyone that I touch. If I understand my customers' win and we agree on key milestones that are going to map out getting us to that win, and maybe they're ghosting me at some point or there's a holdup on their end, certainly I can sell by making sure that they understand that milestone that we've agreed on or that win for them is in jeopardy or might be in jeopardy. And there might be resources that I've allotted or that I have standing by that could be in jeopardy if we don't get a response, things of that nature. So there are still ways that you can massage that dialogue with finesse. There are still sales fundamentals, but seeking to serve means that instead of being that old pushy connotation of sales and showing up all about me and this is what, cramming my product down your throat, it's more about showing up, seeking to understand what they want to talk about, showing up around that, being consultative, and figuring out, hey, is there a fit here? How do we align? Those are the things that I think are super important.
Yeah. And not to throw, I know we were all chuckling at Dave's comment. We'll have to pop it up here in a minute. But Carson, I want to ask you this question. I find a lot of times sales professionals to sales leadership to even C-suite, they use the words buyer centric, or they'll even say, we understand the buyer has changed. But yet when you open up the hood a little bit, the motions haven't changed. What do you attribute to that? Because I think today's episode is really that attempt at a flyby to go, yeah, you might use these words. In fact, I would bet there's some people that saw the title of this and were like, I got that. I get it. And I would push back and say a lot of people that even though they're using the right words, they don't have the strength of meaning that's necessary to really create change.
Making an organizational change can be quite an undertaking because you're going to have people that are going to be resistant. They're going to remember how it was. There is training that is required. And training a lot of times too. I mean, we could do a whole episode on the value of sales training and how to make it effective. The problem is a lot of times it becomes a one-off. We're going to cover this information with you, but then everybody's going to go back out there and they're going to go back to their comfortable ways of mediocrity or their comfortable ways of failing. And I think that's the challenge, is that you have to really have a full board organizational plan and strategy to make a change like that. I think that there's a lot of great leaders that see it and that they may discuss that, cover it in their town halls, talk about it with their team, send it in their memos, talk about it on team meetings. But unless it's actually being done at the field level and the sellers are changing behaviors and being consistent with their execution, you're not going to see a shift. Now, I have seen, like working in the organization that I work at, we've had some big cultural shifts over the last several years. And I think, especially in light of the pandemic, there was a lot of change toward working more from a virtual perspective. There's obviously been a bigger shift toward, being your authentic self, being vulnerable and things of that stature. But a lot of that's almost the exact opposite of what I think a lot of sales cultures have historically been. I can tell you, I've learned a ton. Compare and contrast sales environments I worked in 20 years ago, where it was all ego driven and it was all about pound the phones. And, I just closed this big deal and I'm, drinks for everybody. And nowadays it's more, it's okay to not be okay. And, let's meet people where they are, et cetera. I think the right answer is probably somewhere closer to where we are. But like anything on the human journey, we're a work in progress. I think it's the resistance. It is the lack of a clear-cut strategy to fully adopt that cultural change. And it's then the lack of consistency in execution. But I think we can continue to make progress.
Yeah. And I think as we've seen too, which, haven't been wearing the shirts lately, but the social selling sucks. It was actually an attempt to get people that knew I was in social selling, whatever the heck that meant. But when they saw that, they go, wait a minute. I thought you were a social selling guy. And it begged the question, like, what do you mean by it? Because there's opportunity inside of social to have strategic, consistent outreach. It's just done a little bit differently. And so it's not that we get rid of outreach, we get rid of cold outreach. We just, when you follow the mindsets and the mindsets influence you, you go, we need to do this a little bit differently. And then you can pick your head up with some clarity and say, how do we do this differently? But you're right. I mean, change is just so stinking hard. And that's a thing that I forget a lot of times, because I've been an entrepreneur. And if I see something that needed to be changed, I got to be the one to influence it. But in these larger companies, it's hard.
I think Dave is being a very good virtual guest today for
He's
us.
being an awesome guest.
Thank you, Dave.
And I wanted to do this first one. He says, flopping around in the water is not the correct motion for swimming. Swimming will get me to where I want to go. Flopping around results in drowning, which makes me think of a movie called Jaws, where the guys were flopping around in the water, and look at the results with that. What occurred there.
See, I was thinking more Nemo. My kids watch it all the time, so it's just keep swimming, just keep swimming.
Yeah, just keep swimming. Well, you know what? I'm going to pull out. Can I pull out a movie? Because I've been thinking about this. You guys remember Better Off Dead?
Of course.
Yeah, he wants his $2. Man, the kid didn't go. He just kept doing it the same way for his $2, and he ended up just getting hurt at the end. Probably not the best movie. I'm gonna stay in my lane, Carson. I apologize.
And then one more from our virtual guest, Dave, is he says, I had a contractor come to my home this morning installing a tile floor and paint a room. I liked him until he tried to close me instead of letting me buy it. My pace, no sale for him.
It's true. You know what I think is funny, and what would be interesting would be to get a collection of stories from audience at some point around times that we've been sold to. Who's been the good ones. I mean, there's times where I'll buy from folks, and I don't even necessarily need what they're selling. They came to my door, but their pitch was so good. It's like, you know what? You deserve a reward, young man.
We carry that gene of being salespeople, and I'm always pulling for salespeople. And it's bad because I'm like you. I buy things I don't need, but I want to reward them for the effort. But I think one of the things I want to point out with Dave's comment, and I hear this a lot. Oh, but that's B2C. That's B2C. It's different. But what we need to understand is that there's such a blending of that now. Our behavior, our expectations as we buy as a consumer influences the way we want to buy in our businesses. Period. End of story. End of discussion. And if anybody disagrees with that, just ask yourself how you prefer to buy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So one more movie reference here.
Some executives can't.
A few good men can, though. A few good men can handle the truth. So
you can't read that line without having the voice in your head.
Yeah.
Jack Nicholson booming out in a courtroom.
All right. So number 6, we've already hit on a bit. The seller's goal is to be viewed as a trusted advisor and guide by the buyer. So I think we'll just move on because I think we've hit that one a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And let's go to number 7. This one's my favorite, actually. And it's maybe, as you said, Brandon, earlier, maybe the more controversial one. But we've had conversations on this recently. And after people have kind of thought about what we said, they realize, oh, you're right. So without further ado, number 7, the buying experience is more important than your product, service, or brand.
Mm-hmm. We should all duck because things are going to get thrown at us about right there.
Yeah. I'll read it again, though. The buying experience is more important than your product, service, or brand. Now, we've been talking a lot about that buying experience, right? We've been talking about that all show. Think about that, though. If you have a crappy buyer experience or buying experience and you think you have a great brand, what is that going to do to your brand? What is it going to do to your product? What is it going to do to your service? It's actually going to cause it to have a lot less stature and a lot less visibility. No different than Dave was just saying here, right? Maybe he had the greatest thing ever that he was trying to sell him for his home, but Dave didn't even give him a chance because the buying experience sucked. I don't know. What's your thought?
Go for it, Carson.
When I think about this, I think about the strength of relationships, and the theme of this whole thing, because you just kind of alluded to this as bullet point 6, is really earning that right to be a trusted advisor. Why is that so important? I mean, it builds that credibility. It establishes that foundation of trust and transparency. If you're able as a seller to spend as much time as you can illuminating what that buying experience could and should look like, helping them avoid any of those gotchas and aha moments, understanding what their buying experience is so that you can plan ahead, see around corners, understand those things, manage expectations, both with the client, with any partners, and internally. Those types of things, controlling those controllables is going to help things go as smoothly as possible. Those are the types of things that are going to build loyalty. Those are the types of things that are going to encourage repeat business. Those are also the things that are going to develop referrals and generate word of mouth recommendations. And frankly, those are the warmest leads there are. So ultimately, what you're trying to do is really replicate that success. And the best thing that you can do is, again, if you control those controllables and make that process go as smoothly as possible, the buyer's going to remember it. And they're going to remember it both within that organization, wherever they may go, and whoever they may tell.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that really brand at the end of the day, right? Isn't that your brand recognition at the end of the day?
Reputation, personal brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can spend a lot of time building up a brand, and you can torpedo it in one bad buying experience.
Yes.
And I think a lot of that is the foundation of fear, right? Trusting the process. Like it's like you're educated enough that you got it up here, but you don't quite believe it here. And then, like Dave's experience, everything was good. If he had just trusted the process and let Dave kind of get there, the guy probably would have closed a deal. But out of fear, we go into like, okay, I got to close a deal. I got to get the contract or whatever. And we end up imploding the opportunity because the buyer experience changes for them and they just go, I'm out. And we've talked about this a few times on the show. I think our generation, kind of the Gen X to baby boomers, they're much more forgiving with that because we had different, sellers were different throughout our earlier years. And we needed sellers for information. And so we are a little bit more graceful with some of those negative behaviors. But now we don't have to be. And the younger buyers coming in, the millennials, the Gen Zs, they've never had that experience where they needed a seller. And so they're not as graceful with it. You overstep, you make a mistake, you frustrate them, whatever, ghosted, which is why I think ghosting is such a big topic now. We talk about getting ghosted and how not to get ghosted. We make those steps and those buyers have no problem just going, plenty of fish in the sea.
Yep. No, completely right. All right. So let's move on to our last three here. We've kind of, again, number 8, which is related really to number 7. Healthy connections and relationships are the foundation of a successful sales model. Now, again, I just want to make sure that we reiterate, we're not telling you like these are facts. These are mindset pieces, right? So these are beliefs rather than facts that we're suggesting or recommending in order to have a different view of this. So that the belief that a healthy connection and relation is the foundation of a success. Carson, I think you manifest that belief, I think, in everything that you do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been a very, very core piece of the success that you've had is by manifesting that belief with yourself and your team. Does that seem accurate?
I remember vividly, and thank you for that, by the way. I remember vividly when I first started working in sales and then also within the organization that I'm at today. And a lot of the feedback that I would get from customers would be, hey, I've had reps before that they only show up when it's time for a renewal or, they're calling when they want to get paid or whatever it is. And I've always tried to be the antithesis of the objections that I get or the reasons that somebody wouldn't want to talk to me. And so how do I show up, in a way, kind of like we've talked about, earning that right to be trusted advisor, seeking to serve. But, I think of my best customer relationships over the years. Biggest deal I ever signed. The guy retired and he's still a mentor of mine. There's another one that we'd go to dinner quarterly. There's another one. He used to take me to this cigar bar. And, we would spend time together and talk, and I would listen, and I would listen to their priorities and really just stay at the pulse of those organizations. And those are the kind of things that really went the farthest for me. And guess what? They all cared about my timelines. They cared about what got me paid. As long as it fit within their parameters of what looked like a win for them and hit their budgetary number, they didn't care how the deal was constructed. And so I was able to convey, hey, there might be some additional levers that I can pull to get you a better deal or to sweeten the pot. There's some additional levers that some are strategic for me that get my team paid. If you're open to that, that might help me get a better discount, things of that nature. Being able to have that kind of a rapport and relationship has made all the difference in the world.
But it started with that mindset, right? And the mindset was, you said, to even be the antithesis of what you saw as the opposite of that.
Yeah, it's like that Seinfeld episode one of my favorite Seinfeld episode ever is The Opposite. And it's where George Costanza is in the coffee shop, and he literally decides to be the exact opposite, do the exact opposite of every inclination that he ever has. And he ends up getting hired by the Yankees and gets this beautiful date. But the amazing thing is, apply it here. Think about what the connotation is of sellers. Pushy, aggressive, egocentric. Be the opposite.
Yeah, wasn't somebody on our show here, Brandon, where somebody was saying that the reputation of was that Larry? I think Larry Levine saying the reputation of sellers, unfortunately, has gotten lower.
It's at an all-time low. He said,
all-time low.
Trust is at an all-time low.
Yeah. So now's the time to switch. All right, we're down to our last two here. Number 9, digital channels are accelerators, not magic bullets, and I think that fits really well into social selling, or our title here. Brandon, why don't you jump on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's two things really there. One is we wanted to kind of attack that mindset that social selling was supposed to be some magic bullet, and why so many sales, either professionals or leaders, had the concept of, oh yeah, we tried social selling and it didn't work. And we wanted to shift that. We wanted to shake that mindset up a little bit. This isn't meant to be a magic bullet. It's not like, we screwed up email collectively, marketers, salespeople, we screwed up email. We got to own it, because we went, ooh, let's just go blast. This whole concept of the email blast is moronic, but yet we all bought into it because we could.
It was easy.
And yeah, it was easy. We didn't think about the buyers. We thought about ourselves. And now what happens is email is mostly ruined, in my opinion. Right? It goes, we did this with Fist Bump. It's a brand new domain over the last, 6-7 months. And we were in spam folders. We were guilty until proven innocent at the very beginning of turning on a brand new domain. Why? Well, that's the motion of most people. Get a new domain and go spam as many people as you can, because we got to go tell everybody about what we do and who we are. So using these tools strategically, using them intelligently, are going to accelerate things. Like, we can talk about our show, not from a sense of, oh, look how good we are, but we have a great team that uses our show, the content of our show, extremely well. And then we use the content of our show. Like, I know somebody who couldn't make it to the show today, but I know that this is a topic that this show and some of the snippets from the show are going to be put into my Yellow Brick Road for this person, because these are where the conversations we've been having. And this is mindsets are, one of the bottom steps of our Yellow Brick Road, and educating people about what we really do.
In the theme of meeting customers where they are, they're on digital channels. That's it. And like I like to say on here a lot, I have over $350 million of deals that have been generated that never would have existed without that first meeting being on LinkedIn. But I didn't get the PO on my LinkedIn inbox. It still required sales fundamentals and all the stuff we talked about today.
Yeah. In the mindset around the show, being an accelerator means having a strategic use for it. I had a conversation earlier this week with a husband and wife team, CEO and CMO for a company, very successful. And as soon as I said the word podcast and show, I could just see their faces, right? Just kind of like, eh. And I asked a couple of questions. Said, let's just take on the elephant in the room. Number one, you're probably thinking, oh, but everybody has a podcast. And they're like, well, yeah. And I said, let me rephrase that. I think it seems like everybody started a podcast, but the average show only lasts 7 episodes. Why is that? They use the show as almost like a blast email. We're going to turn the show on and we're going to do this, and POs are going to magically fall from the sky. Doesn't happen. You've got to have that strategy and that plan around using your show. And then the second thing is I don't see direct dollars coming in from my show. Well, and I made this mistake back in 2015. I turned on a live show and a podcast, and we were going to do all this stuff. And guess what? No one showed up. No one showed up, and we didn't have anything planned to do with the content. So after about, 16, 17 episodes, we shut it down because it wasn't worth my time.
Yeah.
I'm going to step off the soapbox.
I'm glad this show has been worth your time, Brandon. 40 in.
40 in.
But again, just to summarize, right? All of the things you just discussed are accelerators when they're used together. There's no one thing that's a magic bullet that if I do this, as you said, POs are going to come raining down, right? That we've never found that yet in my 35 years. I don't think we will in the next 35 years. Maybe Chat GPT can do that for us. I don't know, but it's still comes back to the hard work. Let's go to number 10. Well, Brandon, you better get back on your soapbox. This is one of your favorites. Number 10 is go slow to move fast.
Let Carson take that. I've been talking too much.
No, this is great. You're on fire today. But I'll take a stab at it. You know what I think about when I think about this one? I think about building the foundation to a successful year. These things are very important. For many people, this is the end of a fiscal year this month, myself included. And so for the next, few weeks going into the next quarter, I'm going to be spending a lot of time carving out what is the strategy, showing up with intentionality with how I want to reach out to customers, being a lot more focused. There's great things that we've talked about in the show of ways to scale effectively and to do kind of some of that mass, newsletter, webinar invitation. But there's also a lot to be said for picking those key 10, 15, 20 executives that I have to get that relationship with in short order and doing the steps to earn those conversations. Those are the types of things that I think about when I think about, kind of working slow, because you've got to have that solid foundation and you've got to work at the speed of the business. Again, the only person that cares about your timelines is usually you. And I think that's where we got to continue to shed that old skin. And, just because our leadership might be saying, hey, we're focused on this frame, this month, this quarter, we've got to have that long game too. We've got to be able to look at it from both lenses, and the long game requires working slow, going slow at the beginning to really set the stage for a smooth and a lot more successful journey in the long run.
Yeah. And what you're talking about, Carson, is you hear people like, I want the hockey stick, right? I want that exponential result. The foundation that you're talking about will yield that as your year goes on, as your fiscal year goes on, where in the beginning it looks like, what am I doing? But you're setting that foundation in place. You're going slow to then see that fast hockey stick.
I will basically spend the next 2 to 3 weeks studying this past year in its entirety. What got us paid? What did I spend a ton of time on that didn't get me paid and my team paid? What missteps did I make? Where did I lose deals and why? What can I do differently on the deals going forward? There are built-in compelling events, I think, and a lot of times with your sales cycles, if you have renewals or you have existing pipeline, obviously that's stuff you want to be visiting. But you also want to look at, and again, like we talked about, what do customers want to talk about right now? What is most resonating, and how can I craft a message in a way that'll help me earn the new conversations that I need to be having? What do I need and want to achieve over this next year? And what do I need to do in the short term in order to make that actually possible? I build a full playbook out with my team, something that we live in every single day. And I take that very seriously. And it didn't happen overnight. These are learnings and things that I have accumulated over time, both as a seller and as a team leader. But you've got to have some intentionality around building the foundation.
I think we should have a show about your lessons learned after you've gotten through your 2 or 3 weeks. I think that would be really, really, really enlightening.
Let's do it.
Okay.
That sounds good.
All right. Well, real quick, our top 10. Number 1, the buyer is in control of their buyer journey. 2, as a seller, you cannot control the buyer journey, but you can influence it. 3, buyers welcome guidance and assistance on their own terms and schedule. 4, earn conversations versus getting conversations. 5, your job is to serve, not sell. 6, the seller's goal is to be viewed as a trusted advisor and guide by the buyer. 7, the buying experience is more important than your product, service, or brand. 8, healthy connections, relationships are the foundation of a successful sales model. 9, digital channels are accelerators, not magic bullets. And 10, go slow to move fast. Do we really cover all of that today?
Great. The only thing we're missing is when I think about countdowns, I always think about Casey Kasem.
Ooh, that's good. I had the audio.
Top 40. We're 40 today. American Top 40.
That's true.
We should have done 40. We could have done a 40 episode for
Let's
3
just
hours.
scrap this whole thing. Let's
Yeah,
just scrap it, and we'll do it again next week.
Yeah.
I kept hearing David Letterman's window break.
I always loved how he'd take the cards and
Yeah.
flip them, and he had a lot of fun.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Have a really good 4th of July weekend and holiday and everything. And Carson, would you like to take us home?
Until next time, everyone, happy social selling.
Thanks, everyone.